On a snow-choked road outside Red Hollow, a former Navy SEAL slowed his truck for one reason. His dog refused to look away. In the headlights stood a woman pushing a wheelchair through the cold, her body bent forward, shielding a 6-year-old girl far too small for the winter closing in on them. She didn't wave. She didn't ask for help. She just kept moving, as if stopping meant losing everything. When the SEAL stepped out and the dog sat between them, something fragile cracked open, and a fight no one expected began. No one survives alone. If this story reaches you, share where you're watching from, and subscribe for more stories of courage and unbreakable bonds. Winter had settled hard over Red Hollow, Wyoming, the kind of town that looked smaller every time the snow came. Nestled between low mountains and long stretches of pine forest, Red Hollow was a place people passed through, not a place they stayed, especially not in January, when the wind cut across the highway like a blade and the sky seemed permanently bruised with storm clouds. On this night, the temperature hovered well below freezing, and snow fell in thick, relentless sheets, erasing the road almost as quickly as tires could mark it. Lucas Hale drove with both hands steady on the wheel of his old pickup, eyes forward, posture straight out of habit. At 29, he was young by most measures, but his face carried a maturity that came from places far from Wyoming. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of athletic build that spoke of discipline rather than vanity. His dark hair was cropped short, military neat, and a faint shadow of stubble traced his strong jaw. His eyes, clear, gray-blue, held a calm alertness, always scanning, always measuring distance and risk. He wasn't in a hurry. He wasn't headed anywhere important. That, in itself, unsettled him. Lucas had left the Navy only weeks earlier. Red Hollow was not home. It was simply the last place on the map where no one expected anything from him. He told himself he was just passing through, that he would keep driving when the storm eased. In truth, he didn't know where he would go next. He only knew he wasn't ready to belong anywhere. In the passenger seat sat Aries, a full-grown German shepherd with a powerful chest and a sable coat darkened by shadow. At 5 years old, Aries moved with controlled confidence, his posture relaxed but alert, amber eyes tracking the shifting white beyond the windshield. One ear stood upright, the other angled slightly back, constantly adjusting to sound. He had served beside Lucas overseas, trained to detect explosives, danger, and subtler things most humans missed. Fear, panic, the quiet signs of someone already breaking. The wind gusted harder, rocking the truck as it climbed a narrow stretch of mountain road. Snow hammered the windshield, and Lucas slowed instinctively, easing his foot off the gas. That was when Aries stiffened. It wasn't a bark, not a growl either, just a low, focused sound deep in his chest. Lucas's grip tightened. "What is it, buddy?" he murmured, eyes narrowing as his headlights cut through the white. Aries leaned forward slightly, muscles tensing, gaze fixed on something ahead and to the right. Lucas tapped the brakes. The truck slowed, tires crunching against packed snow. At first he thought it was debris, a fallen sign, maybe a stalled vehicle buried under drift. Then the shape moved. A woman emerged into the beam of the headlights, hunched against the wind, pushing something heavy with both hands. Lucas's breath caught. She was young, early 30s maybe, but exhaustion made her look older. Her dark hair whipped loose around her face, damp with melting snow, strands sticking to pale cheeks reddened raw by cold. She wore a thin winter coat that had seen better years, the fabric worn at the elbows, the zipper struggling to hold against the wind. Her shoulders were rigid, braced forward with stubborn determination. In front of her was a wheelchair. Seated in it was a small girl, no older than 6. The child's legs were wrapped in mismatched blankets, her boots dangling inches above the snow. She clutched a faded, stuffed bear to her chest with stiff, trembling fingers. Her face was heartbreakingly still, too still for a child her age. Large eyes stared straight ahead, dark and quiet, as if she had learned not to expect the world to answer back. Lucas pulled the truck to a stop. The woman froze instantly, stepping in front of the wheelchair as if her body alone could shield the child from whatever danger approached. Her eyes snapped to the truck, wide and sharp with fear. She didn't wave. She didn't call out. She didn't ask for help. She had learned better. Lucas opened the door, cold air slamming into him. The wind clawed at his jacket as he stepped down, boots sinking into fresh snow. He raised his hands slowly, palms open, careful with every movement. Before he could speak, Aries jumped down beside him. The dog did not rush forward. He did not bark. Instead, Aries walked a few steps ahead, then deliberately sat in the snow, tail giving a slow, gentle sweep from side to side. His posture was relaxed, non-threatening, an unmistakable signal, intentional and trained. The woman's gaze flicked to the dog. Just for a second, something in her expression shifted. Not relief, but confusion, uncertainty. Lucas stopped several feet away, giving her space. He took in the details automatically. The way her hands shook, the bluish tint to the child's lips, the shallow, controlled breaths of someone pushing past her limits. He spoke only once. "You don't need to keep going tonight." His voice was calm, low, steady. The same tone he'd used with civilians caught in chaos zones overseas. No pressure, no commands. The woman swallowed. Her grip tightened on the wheelchair handles. Up close, Lucas could see the fine lines of strain around her eyes, the way her jaw set, as if refusing to crack. She looked like someone who had learned that stopping meant losing ground. "I'm fine," she said, though the lie barely held together. The little girl said nothing. Her fingers curled deeper into the stuffed bear's matted fur. Aries remained seated, snow collecting along his back, eyes flicking once toward the child and back to Lucas, as if checking in. Lucas nodded slowly, accepting the answer without challenging it. "My name's Lucas," he said. "That's Aries." The woman hesitated, then answered, voice tight. "Mara." She glanced down at the girl. "This is Ellie." Ellie didn't look up. The wind howled louder, filling the silence. Snow erased the road behind them almost instantly. Lucas glanced once over his shoulder, calculating distance, temperature, exposure time. Training ran the numbers whether he wanted it to or not. People didn't survive long out here, especially not children. Aries shifted, standing now, moving just close enough for Ellie to notice him. The dog lowered his head slightly, ears soft, tail still. Ellie's eyes flickered, just briefly, to the animal. Her grip on the bear loosened a fraction. Mara saw it too. Lucas felt something settle in his chest, heavy and quiet. He hadn't planned to stop. He hadn't planned to speak. But the road had put them in front of him all the same. Behind them, Red Hollow disappeared into the storm, unaware that one choice on a forgotten highway was about to change more than one life. The cabin stood near the edge of a frozen lake, half hidden by snow-laden pines and the low curve of the land. It was small, built from dark timber weathered by decades of Wyoming winters. The porch sagged slightly on one side, and the windows were clouded with age, but the structure held firm against the wind. When Lucas cut the engine, silence pressed in, thick, broken only by the hiss of falling snow and the distant creak of trees bending under its weight. Lucas stepped out first, boots crunching. He moved with quiet efficiency, opening the passenger door and clearing snow from the step before Mara pushed the wheelchair down. The cold stung her fingers, but she said nothing. Her shoulders were tight, as if braced for refusal even here, even now. Inside, the cabin smelled of old wood and cold ash. Lucas set to work immediately. He shrugged off his jacket, revealing a fitted thermal shirt stretched across a lean, muscular frame, and knelt by the stone hearth. His movements were practiced, economical, hands that had built fires in worse places, under worse conditions. Within minutes, kindling caught, and flame bloomed. Weak at first, then stronger. Warmth crept outward in slow waves. Aries stepped inside last and took position near the door, lowering himself to the floor with his body angled toward the room. His amber eyes tracked every sound, every shift. The dog was calm but vigilant, the kind of presence that made a space feel held rather than guarded. Ellie remained silent. Lucas noticed the way her small hands clenched the arms of the wheelchair, the way her gaze stayed fixed on the floorboards. She was thin, fragile, in a way that went beyond winter hunger. Her brown hair fell unevenly around her face, as if cut by someone in a hurry. The stuffed bear in her lap had one ear missing, and a patch sewn crookedly across its chest. Lucas crouched beside the wheelchair. "You're safe here," he said gently, though he wasn't sure she could hear him yet. Ellie didn't respond, but when Aries shifted closer, lowering his head until his nose nearly touched the bear, her fingers loosened just a little. Mara watched everything. She was in her early 30s, with sharp cheekbones and dark eyes that carried too much vigilance for someone so young. Her coat hung loosely on her slender frame, and her boots were worn thin at the soles. She stood with her arms folded tightly, as if afraid that if she relaxed, something essential would spill out. Lucas turned his attention to the wheelchair. One wheel wobbled when he tested it. He frowned, reached for a small toolkit from his truck, and knelt again. He didn't ask permission. He didn't announce what he was doing. He simply fixed what he could, tightening bolts, aligning the rim, steadying the chair. It was the kind of help that didn't demand gratitude. While he worked, Aries lifted the stuffed bear gently from Ellie's lap. For a heartbeat, Mara tensed. But the dog only turned, patted a few steps away, then returned and placed the bear back into Ellie's hands, nudging it closer to her chest with his nose. Ellie looked up. It was brief, but it was unmistakable. Her eyes flicked to Aries, then to Lucas, then back down again. The corners of her mouth twitched, just barely. Mara's breath caught. She sank into the chair nearest the fire, exhaustion finally pulling her down. The warmth seemed to reach her all at once, and her hands began to tremble. Not from cold this time, but from release. "My husband," she said suddenly, voice low, almost flat. "He died 2 years ago." Lucas didn't stop what he was doing. He listened without turning. "Coal mine accident," Mara continued. "A collapse. They said it was quick." She swallowed. Ellie was there, waiting for him at the fence. The fire cracked softly. "After that, everything changed," Mara said. "His parents stepped in. They said they were helping. Paperwork, appointments, decisions. I let them." Her fingers dug into her coat sleeves. "When Ellie's treatment got expensive, when she needed more than checkups and promises, they said it wasn't sustainable, that I wasn't capable." Lucas straightened slowly. "They kept the documents," Mara went on. "Medical forms, insurance, everything that mattered, and then one day they told us to leave." Her jaw tightened. "They said Ellie would be better off without me dragging her down." Ellie sat very still as her mother spoke, eyes lowered, shoulders drawn inward. Lucas felt something hard settle behind his ribs. He'd seen abandonment dressed up as responsibility before. He finished tightening the last bolt and stood. "Your daughter needs care," he said quietly. "Not permission." Mara laughed once, sharp and humorless. "Try telling that to people who own the papers." Aries shifted, settling down beside the wheelchair, his broad body close enough that Ellie's knee brushed his fur. The dog exhaled slowly, steady and warm. Ellie's shoulders eased, her head tipped forward until it rested lightly against Aries's side. She slept like that. Later, when the fire burned low and the wind eased outside, Lucas laid a blanket over Ellie's legs. Mara watched from across the room, eyes heavy, torn between fear and gratitude. "I didn't expect anyone to stop," she said softly. Lucas met her gaze. "Most people don't." The cabin remained quiet after that. Not empty, but still. No laughter yet, no easy words. Just warmth, breath, and the slow, fragile beginning of something that hadn't existed here before. The storm returned without warning. What had been a steady fall of snow thickened into a white wall, the wind rising in sharp, violent gusts that rattled the cabin windows and drove needles of ice through every seam. Outside, the frozen lake vanished into darkness. Inside, the air grew tense, as if the walls themselves were bracing. Lucas was awake when Ellie's breathing changed. It was subtle at first, a hitch between breaths, a faint whimper swallowed before it could become sound. He crossed the room in 2 strides and knelt beside the wheelchair. Ellie's skin burned beneath his fingertips, her cheeks flushed an angry red that didn't belong to winter cold. Her eyes fluttered, unfocused, and her small hands trembled against the blanket. "Hey," he said softly, keeping his voice low and even. "I've got you." Mara was already there, panic sharp in her movements. She hovered, unsure where to place her hands, fear tightening her chest. "She was fine an hour ago," she whispered. "She doesn't get sick like this." Lucas nodded once. Fever could move fast in weather like this, especially in a child whose body had learned to ration strength. He slid a thermometer from his kit, checked it, then set it aside with a quiet exhale. "Okay," he said. "We'll bring it down." He worked with the practiced calm of a man trained to act while everything else fell apart. He soaked a cloth with warmed water, laid it gently across Ellie's forehead, and adjusted the blanket so heat stayed where it was needed. He checked her pulse, steady but fast, and watched the rise and fall of her chest. Ellie stirred, a soft sound escaping her throat as her breathing sped up. Her eyes opened wide, fear flashing through them, sharp and immediate. She sucked in air too quickly, panic climbing. Lucas leaned closer, lowering himself so his face was in her line of sight. "Ellie," he said, firm but gentle. "Look at me. Breathe with me." It wasn't enough. Her breaths came faster, shallow and uneven. Mara reached for her daughter, hands shaking. "Ellie, sweetheart." Ari's moved without command. The German shepherd rose and stepped in close, positioning his broad body along the side of the wheelchair. He pressed his flank against Ellie's legs, solid and warm, then lowered his head until it rested against her forearm. His breathing slowed deliberately, deep and steady, a rhythm offered without expectation. Ellie's eyes darted to him. Aries didn't move. He stayed. He always stayed. Lucas took Ellie's small hand and guided it gently to the dog's fur. "Feel that," he said. "Match him." Her fingers curled into the thick coat, clutching. Her breathing stuttered, then slowed. One breath, then another. The panic ebbed, replaced by exhaustion that sagged through her limbs. Mara sank to her knees beside them, a hand pressed over her mouth as tears slipped free. She hadn't realized how tightly she'd been holding herself, together until the moment she saw her child breathe again. The wind screamed outside, hammering the cabin, but inside the room found a fragile balance. Lucas stayed where he was, monitoring, adjusting, counting breaths under his own breath, like a prayer he no longer believed in, but still needed. As the fever eased, memory rose uninvited. Sand instead of snow, heat instead of cold. A small concrete room shattered by noise and smoke. A child, older than Ellie but with the same hollow fear in her eyes, curled behind a half-collapsed wall. Lucas had carried her out, one arm locked around her ribs, the other covering her head as rounds cracked overhead. Her mother had not made it. Lucas had stood in the dust afterward, the child clinging to him, asking questions he could not answer. He had learned then what it meant to save someone and still lose everything. The memory tightened his chest. He forced himself back into the room, back into the now. Ellie was here, breathing, warm. Aries lifted his head briefly, amber eyes meeting Lucas's, as if checking him the same way Lucas checked everyone else. The dog nudged Lucas's elbow once, grounding him. Hours passed. The storm raged, then dulled into a low, constant roar. Ellie slept fitfully, her grip on Ares never loosening. Lucas dozed in short bursts, waking at every shift of sound. Mara remained close, afraid to leave her daughter's side even for a moment. Near dawn, Ellie stirred again. Her eyes opened, clearer this time, and she turned her head slightly, cheek brushing Ares's fur. "He didn't go," she murmured, voice thin but certain. Lucas froze. Ares's tail thumped once against the floor, soft and sure. "No," Lucas said, his voice rougher than he intended. "He didn't." Ellie's lips curved into the faintest smile before sleep claimed her again. Lucas leaned back against the chair, heart pounding. The words echoed in his mind, striking deeper than any accusation ever could. He had spent years believing distance was safety, that leaving first hurt less than staying, but here was a child who understood loyalty better than most adults ever would. The storm outside began to ease, the wind dropping into tired sighs. Pale gray light crept toward the edges of the sky, filtered through clouds heavy with leftover snow. Inside the cabin, the fire burned low but steady. Ares remained at Ellie's side, unmoving. Mara watched them both, her fear tempered by something new. Hope, fragile but real. Lucas stayed awake until morning, guarding the room not as a soldier, but as a man finally allowing himself to care. The morning after the storm broke open, gray and brittle, the kind of quiet that followed violence. Snow lay in deep, uneven drifts around the cabin, untouched except for a narrow path Lucas had shoveled from the door to the truck. The frozen lake beyond reflected the sky like dull metal, and the air carried a thin, watchful stillness. Lucas was outside splitting wood when the sound reached him. Engines, distant but deliberate. Ares lifted his head at once, ears angling forward, body rising into alert readiness. Two vehicles emerged slowly from the trees. A county sheriff's SUV, white with blue markings dulled by winter grime, and behind it, a dark sedan that looked out of place on a road like this. Mara appeared in the doorway, tension snapping through her posture the instant she saw them. Ellie sat just inside, bundled in blankets, her hands tightening around the bear when Ares moved back toward her. The sheriff stepped out first. He was a broad, middle-aged man with a weathered face and thinning gray hair tucked under his hat. His name badge read, Sheriff Nolan Briggs. Years of rural law enforcement showed in the way he moved. Unhurried, observant, eyes constantly measuring. He adjusted his coat against the cold and took in the scene with a practiced neutrality. The couple from the sedan followed close behind. The man was tall and stiff-backed, his hair silver at the temples, his wool coat expensive but poorly suited for snow. His jaw was set in a permanent line of disapproval. The woman beside him was smaller, wrapped in a tailored coat, her dark hair pinned neatly back. Her eyes were sharp and restless, scanning the cabin as if assessing damage. They did not look relieved. They looked irritated. Sheriff Briggs approached first. "We got a report of a missing child during the storm," he said evenly. "Name's Ellie Quinn." Mara's throat tightened. She stepped forward instinctively, placing herself between the cabin and her daughter. "She's here," she said. "She's with me." The man from the sedan scoffed quietly. "That's exactly the problem." He introduced himself as Richard Quinn, Ellie's grandfather, his voice clipped and authoritative. The woman, Elaine Quinn, nodded once, lips pressed thin. They carried themselves like people accustomed to being believed. Richard produced a folder from inside his coat. He handed it to the sheriff with a sharp motion. "We're her legal guardians," he said. "Her mother took her without consent. Ran off in the middle of winter. We've been worried sick." Mara flinched at the words. "That's not—" Sheriff Briggs raised a hand, not unkindly. "Ma'am, let me take a look." As he scanned the documents, the air tightened. Mara stood rigid, fingers curled into her sleeves, eyes flicking anxiously between the sheriff and the folder. Lucas stayed where he was, a few steps back, silent. He knew better than to crowd a moment like this. The paperwork was clean at first glance. Signatures, dates, authority. Sheriff Briggs exhaled slowly. "These papers do list you as guardians," he said. "That's not something I can ignore." Elaine stepped forward, her voice smooth, practiced. "We only want what's best for Ellie. Her mother isn't stable, no income, no plan. She put the child in danger." Ellie whimpered softly from inside the cabin. Richard took a step toward her. "Ellie," he said, forcing warmth into his tone. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's go home." Ellie shrank back instantly, her small body folding inward. She reached for Mara's coat with both hands, fingers digging in, breath quickening. Before anyone could move, Aries stepped forward. The German shepherd positioned himself squarely in front of the wheelchair, body angled, legs braced. He didn't bare his teeth. He didn't growl. He simply stood there, solid, immovable, eyes fixed on Richard with a calm that was anything but passive. Sheriff Briggs noticed. So did the deputy who had arrived quietly behind him, a younger man with a narrow face and cautious eyes. Ellie buried her face against her mother's side. "Don't," she whispered. The word cut clean through the air. Sheriff Briggs closed the folder slowly. "Sir," he said to Richard, "I'm going to need you to step back." Richard bristled. "That dog needs to be restrained." Aries didn't move. Lucas spoke for the first time. "He's trained," he said evenly. "He won't hurt anyone. He's responding to fear." Sheriff Briggs glanced at Lucas, then at Ellie's white-knuckled grip, then back at the grandparents. He'd seen enough children to know when something wasn't lining up. "I'm not transferring custody today," he said firmly. "Not here. Not like this." Elaine's composure cracked. "You don't have that authority." "I do," Briggs interrupted. "At least enough to pause this and look closer." He turned to Mara. "Ma'am, I need you to come into town later today. We're going to ask some questions. About guardianship. About finances." Mara nodded shakily, relief and terror colliding in her chest. Richard's face darkened. "This is outrageous." "Maybe," Briggs said. "But a child doesn't react like that without reason." The grandparents were asked to return to their vehicle. They did so stiffly, anger radiating off them like cold. When they were out of earshot, Briggs turned back to Lucas. "You know anything about this situation?" he asked. Lucas hesitated, then nodded. "I might." He explained only what mattered, that he had military contacts, that Ellie's condition matched cases he'd seen where care was delayed or withheld. He mentioned a doctor he trusted, someone who could confirm whether treatment had been interrupted. Briggs listened, eyes thoughtful. "I'll want those names." "You'll have them," Lucas said. The sheriff looked once more at Ellie, still tucked against, her mother Aries unmoving at her side. "For now," he said quietly, "she stays here." The vehicles drove away slowly, their tracks cutting harsh lines through the snow. Nothing had been decided, but something had shifted. The courthouse in Red Hollow was a squat brick building that smelled faintly of pine cleaner and old paper. Snow clung to the steps, tracked inside by boots that had seen too many winters. Mara stood near the back of the room, her coat folded over her arm, her spine straight despite the tremor in her hands. She wore a simple dress borrowed from a neighbor, dark blue and modest, the kind chosen to avoid attention. Her hair was pulled back neatly, revealing a face that had learned how to hold itself together in public. Ellie sat beside her in the wheelchair, bundled in a soft gray blanket. Aries lay at her feet, head on his paws, eyes open and watchful. The dog's presence drew a few curious glances, but no one objected. Red Hollow had learned to accept practical solutions. Lucas took a seat a few rows behind them. He wore a clean flannel and dark jeans, his posture relaxed but alert, as if ready to step in if the ground shifted. He did not look toward Mara unless she did first. The judge entered with quiet authority. Judge Helen Mercer was a woman in her early 60s with silver hair cut short and clear eyes that missed very little. Her voice, when she spoke, carried neither warmth nor cruelty, only balance. The proceedings were brief, not because the matter lacked weight, but because the evidence did not leave much room for doubt. Financial records showed the diverted funds, neat columns of numbers that traced a path from disability assistance and mining insurance payouts into private accounts. Medical logs revealed gaps in Ellie's treatment, visits canceled, and therapies halted without explanation. A handwriting analyst confirmed inconsistencies in signatures on guardianship documents. When the verdict came, it landed cleanly. The grandparents were found guilty of falsifying guardianship papers, unlawfully claiming benefits intended for a disabled child, and withholding medical care. The sentence reflected the court's judgment: suspended jail time, mandatory restitution covering all withheld medical expenses, and a permanent protective order prohibiting contact with Mara and Ellie. Mara closed her eyes, not in triumph, but in relief so deep it hollowed her chest. Ellie watched the judge, quiet and solemn, then leaned down to whisper into Aries' fur. The dog's tail thumped once, slow and certain. Outside, the wind had softened. Snow drifted down in small, patient flakes, dusting the courthouse steps as people filtered away. Mara paused there, drawing a breath that did not feel borrowed for the first time in years. Red Hollow did not change overnight. Winter remained winter, but the days found a rhythm. The rehabilitation center sat on the edge of town, a low building with wide windows and ramps cleared daily by volunteers. Inside, the air was warm and smelled faintly of rubber mats and citrus cleaner. Dr. Naomi Brooks, the pediatric therapist assigned to Ellie, greeted them with an easy smile. She was in her late 30s, athletic, with curly hair pulled into a loose ponytail and hands that moved with calm assurance. "We go slow," she said, crouching to Ellie's eye level. "We listen to your body, and we stop when it tells us to." Ellie nodded, serious. Sessions began with small goals: standing frames, balance bars, encouragement measured in inches rather than miles. Aries waited nearby every time, lying where Ellie could see him, his steady presence a promise she could lean on. When fear tightened her breathing, she reached for his fur and found it warm, familiar. One afternoon, Ellie pushed herself upright with trembling arms. Her legs shook. Dr. Brooks counted softly. Mara held her breath. Lucas stood back, hands loose at his sides, unwilling to crowd the moment. Ellie stood, only for a second. But it was enough. Her face broke into a grin so sudden it startled a laugh from her mother. Aries rose and wagged, careful not to bump her. Ellie looked down at him, eyes bright. "You're my hero," she said. Aries tilted his head, solemn as ever. Mara found work at the town library, a quiet place with tall shelves and a window that caught the afternoon light. She shelved books, helped children with homework, learned the steady comfort of a routine that did not demand more than she could give. People greeted her by name. She learned to believe them. Lucas stayed. He repaired fences when they leaned, split wood when it piled too high, and drove Ellie to appointments when Mara's shift ran long. He did not make promises. He simply showed up. Each day was an answer in itself. When the sun dipped low and the sky turned pearl gray, they walked together along the plowed path by the frozen lake. Snow whispered beneath boots and wheels. Lucas pushed the chair with easy care, matching Ellie's pace. Mara walked beside them, hands tucked into her coat pockets, shoulders lighter than they had been in years. Aries ran wide arcs around them, leaving looping tracks that crossed and recrossed the path. He paused now and then to look back, as if counting them, making sure no one fell behind. Snow fell softly, and the town breathed in its quiet way. Winter remained, but it no longer felt like a sentence. Sometimes, the hardest winters in our lives don't arrive with snow or storms. They come quietly, through loss, exhaustion, fear, or the slow belief that we must endure everything alone. This story isn't about miracles that erase pain overnight. It's about people who choose to stop, to stay, and to care, even when it would be easier to keep driving. It's about a child who learns that safety can exist again, a mother who rediscovers her own strength, and a man who realizes that healing doesn't require grand promises, only presence. In everyday life, we pass moments like this more often than we think. Someone struggling silently, someone waiting for help they're afraid to ask for, someone hoping, just once, that another person will notice. If this story touched you, take a moment to reflect. Have you ever been the one who needed help, or the one who chose to stop? Please share this story with someone who might need a reminder that no winter lasts forever. Leave a comment below and tell us which moment spoke to your heart. And if you believe in stories of hope, resilience, and second chances, subscribe to the channel and join our community. None of us are meant to walk through the cold alone.